Council. We're here today concerning a hearing for Pathways and related to an ordinance and potential non-renewal of their business license. What we want to do is take just a second to note for those of the public that are here with us today that this is a hearing essentially for Pathways. It is not, as a council session, it is an opportunity for residents to be heard. However, there is a council session scheduled for tomorrow. So anyone who is here today who is wishing to offer comment, we would openly invite them to appear at the council hearing set for tomorrow. The last thing I want to mention before Attorney Hall gets up on behalf of Pathways, there was discussion between the city and Pathways. What is provided by ordinance is an opportunity for presentation for renewal and against renewal in the interest of economy and also affording businesses in the community all the due process rights that they deserve. Today's setting is essentially for Pathways to present the evidence related to renewing the license. Our procedural steps next will be at the council session, have an opportunity to discuss what occurred today. If in fact the council maintains a position of non-renewal, Pathways will have an opportunity to appear, examine witnesses, and introduce evidence. So with that, I'll turn it over to Attorney Hall.
Thank you. I think I'm gonna speak from here because I got my papers and microphones clutter me up. I'm not used to having a bunch of microphones in front of me. Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to come and talk to y'all about Pathway and what it does. And as Mr. Balch said, we talked about this as a preliminary step to give you guys some positive information about maybe correcting some misconceptions out there, but also about some positive steps that we're going to take and about what our mission is about. And hopefully my words will be enough. But if they're not, then we'll come back later before you guys make a final vote and have an opportunity to present evidence and call witnesses and go forward in a bit more adversarial kind of way. I wanted to be positive today to the extent I can. It's not my strong suit, lawyers, but I wanted to be positive and focus on some good things that have been done and that can be done. I've got Dr. Fegan here with me, Wave. She's the executive director. She became the executive director when Pathway removed the previous executive director after an adverse event that I know you guys are aware of. I know Chief Dobbins is aware of in early September. She was hired in I think in mid-October, and since then has done a very good job. Pathway takes care of kids that are in the custody of the state of Alabama Department of Human Resources. Not kids that are incarcerated, not kids that are locked up, but kids that have been removed from their home because their parents and other family members are not able to take care of them. Often their parents or other family members or boyfriends have done things that make the child's circumstances worse. So if you know much about the legal process, and I'm sure your counsel know more about the DHR legal process than I do, but it's a severe step to have a child removed from a home. The circumstances for that child have to be really bad. And those are the children that Pathway is caring for at the behest of the state of Alabama. They're in protective custody of our state. They're Alabama kids who have been mistreated, abused, and neglected. And the state of Alabama has a moral and legal obligation to care for those children. And they've enlisted Pathway to help in a highly supervised, highly monitored context to help try to care for those kids and put their life in a better path. I have some personal affinity for this. If you'll Google Alabama Sheriff's Youth Ranches, you will see an organization founded by the sheriffs of the state of Alabama in 1966 to care for the very kinds of kids that Pathway has. They provide what's called a basic level care. A Pathway provides a moderate level care, kids that have even more difficulties than what the Sheriff's Youth Association provides. But I'm on the board of that organization. I have a farm. My parents donated their family home to the Alabama Sheriff's Youth Ranches to care for these types of kids, because my dad, who had some remarkable success, if you'll Google Rick Hall, you won't find my name. You'll find my dad's name, who was the father of Muscle Shoals music. He had some remarkable success, but he came from circumstances like these girls. My grandfather was so poor he had to travel to Chicago and Cleveland for work. They were left with family members. They were left in tough circumstances. So my dad had a heart for that before he passed away. He donated the family home. Now on the farm where I live also, we have 3 homes taking care of girls. The sheriff's organization, the motto, you'd think the first thing I was going to quote, you'd think I had it up front, but the motto that they have is, it's easier to build boys and girls than to repair men and women. And that's what we're dealing with here. If these kids, if we don't break the path that they're on because of the conduct of the adults in their lives, if we don't break that, then they're going to have lives that don't meet the expectations that they deserve, and they're going to have lives that are not what we want for Alabama children. So that's what Pathway is about. I also have Richard White here with me. Richard is the program director and education director. So Pathway is a child care facility, and it is a school. Richard, like me, I think, is a political science nerd because he got a degree from Sanford in political science. And then if you get a political science degree, there are 2 choices. You can go into teaching or you can go to law school because there's not much job opportunities besides that. So Richard went into teaching. He has a master's in school counseling, a master's in education leadership. Dr. Fegan has a doctorate in marriage and family therapy and a master's in counseling psychology. So we have highly qualified people at the helm dealing with these children and trying to help them. So what we're about today is trying to decide in our free society in America when a service for children in need can be shut down and ought to be shut down. When people's livelihoods who work there, there's over 30 employees working there now, when they lose their jobs because of circumstances that the government says we can't allow. That's really the crux of it today. This isn't just like we're going to pull a business license, but we're going to shut down a business. We're going to cause people to lose jobs if we go the wrong path here. Thomas Sowell, who, if any of you guys are Reagan fans, Thomas Sowell is a conservative philosopher that sort of came up in the early 80s when I was in college and a big Reagan fan. And he said, both free speech and property rights belong to individuals, but their real function is social, to benefit vast numbers of people who do not themselves exercise these rights. Your council mentioned due process, and Pathway has a due process right to property, right to use their property, a right of freedom to have the business they want to have. But that's not really what we're about. As Mr. Sowell said, what we're really about is those freedoms of pursuit of life, liberty, and property are things that help society. How are we helping society? How's Pathway helping society? Well, first, they're improving the lives of these kids. They're trying to. Now, if you dealt with children at risk, with children who have depression issues, with anxiety issues, then you know they're not all successes. This is tough work. My wife was the director of the youth ranch in Calvert County. I've seen her cry over children who she thought she was helping that it turned out not to be successful. I've also seen her joy when she's gotten a girl graduated from our program, a good job, and a marriage. We've got college students from our program right now at UNA who are doing well as students. We take, at our facility in Calvert County, we take children who come from places like Pathway, moderate care facilities, and we're a step-down facility. So when they finish the program at Pathway and they've done well, then they can go to a home like the Sheriff Youth Ranches and many other homes in the state. The Methodists have a foster home program. The Baptists do. A lot of programs to support kids in need that do a lot of good. So we're helping the children. We're providing jobs. We're helping the local economy. If we could get out from under the problems that we've had and the stigma that we've had, we could have up to 100 employees working at that facility, which would provide you a lot more activity in the area. It would help in the economy in a lot of ways. It would apply jobs to a lot of people. And what's the counterbalance? Why are we about shutting the business down when the business is taking care of kids that the state of Alabama has a moral and legal obligation to take care of? Well, we had an awful incident in early September. We had 6 kids. I think Chief Dobson would perhaps agree with me that there was one in particular reading leader that was, it looks like, in my reading and talking to people, who was more of a problem. And they did a lot of damage and injured a staff member and were incarcerated, put in the juvenile delinquent program. Those kids aren't there anymore. There were a lot of girls there that night who acted appropriately, who didn't participate in that. Pathway didn't pick those kids. Pathway didn't say, hey, we want those kids, we think they're suitable for our level of care. DHR makes that decision. Now, Dr. Fegan tells me that she's analyzing those placements, as they call them. When the DHR makes a placement, she's really scrutinizing them. But Pathway can't tell the state of Alabama no very much. They have to take the placement. They can in like a small percentage of the time can push back, but it's a DHR medical professional decision about whether our level of care is appropriate for those girls. Those girls, it turned out to be, it wasn't appropriate. We also did not, the management at that time wasn't skilled at de-escalating before things got worse. So it escalated into a bad situation. But that's why, I mean, I think that's why we've got the problem. I think that's why you guys have been concerned about it. The facility has been under different ownership, I'm told, since 1996. To my knowledge, no member of the public has ever been injured by a child from that facility. We only have girls. We don't have teenage boys there. And I know girls can act rough, but it's different with girls than with boys. But in, what is that, 28 years, no citizen has ever been injured? So what's the counterbalancing harm? Pathway had property damage. It was its property. An employee was injured. But guess what? That kind of thing is happening every day in public schools throughout Alabama and in Madison County. These children who, yes, have issues with depression. Yes, and given where they came from, we would probably all be depressed if we were in those situations. These children have anxiety issues. But guess what? Kids all over Madison County in the school systems have those same issues. Exact same issues. These kids aren't any different than kids going to the high school where your kids or grandkids go. They don't deserve to be stigmatized in that manner as if somehow they're hyper super dangerous. What's the difference between these children and the children that are in the general public that have depression issues, for example, or have suicide thoughts? I'll share an article with you later. 20% of children, I think I'm remembering this right, have thoughts of suicide. Shocking to me. 20%. That's general population. That's not kids at Pathway. What's the difference between our kids and the kids in the public school here who have depression issues or have feelings of suicide? Well, normally it's parents. Because in most instances, our kids' parents are making it worse or causing the problem in the first place. Because that's why they're pulled from the home by the legal process and the Department of Human Resources to protect them from their parents. Kids in the public school may have great parents. I mean, think back in your life. I can think of a child that my daughter was friends with who was in her Sunday school class. Her father was in law enforcement. Great couple, went to church with them. This child was cutting herself. But she had parents that cared about her and got her help. These kids don't have that. That's why they're at Pathway. We're trying to help them. But there are a bunch of kids in the public school system that aren't getting help. So that's a big difference. I've got a bunch of articles here, and I don't want to waste your time berating it, and I'll give them to the court for as exhibits later. I don't want to, however council wants me to handle it, but I'll just sort of say what they're talking about. Yesterday afternoon, I was thinking about what I was going to say. And I was wanting to say, how do I communicate that, look, these kids aren't, armed felons. They're not thugs. They're children who have needs, who are suffering, who need love. How do I convey that they're not different from kids in the general public? And so I just Googled fights in a school in Huntsville, Alabama. And the first page, I went a little into the second page, but the first page, here's what I got. AL.com, 2/25/16. Video shows brawl in Huntsville High School. News 19, WHNT, 11/19/21. Columbia High parent calls for action against, quote, persistent street fighting in the school. He says every single, this was the doctor actually that was speaking up. He says every single day since the school year started, there have been 40 fights. He's seen video of pulling hair. He's seen video of one girl kicking another child in the face. That's in Columbia High School, public school, 3.5 years ago. Back in my home county, February 4th, 2025. Teen arrested at fight at Carver County High School. Just here in the last few days. News 19, WHNT, September 24th, 2024, at Austin High School. 3 arrested. 1 child injured with a screwdriver that one of these children was using as a weapon. That's in a public school in Austin, at Austin High School. .48 WAFF, February 1, 2018. Teacher injured in fight at Huntsville High School. The school system didn't know how many kids were involved and said, we have 2 SROs, school resource officers, and security around to prevent arguments among students from escalating. Well, tell me, if Huntsville High has 2 trained police officers on the premises and still have kids get in fights that require further intervention, that injure a teacher, how is that any better than Pathway? Madison County has 10 full-time school resource officers dedicated to being in the schools all the time. Now, that's to protect from outside dangers, sure. But it's also to protect from fights and whatnot in the school. Madison County has a 24/7 call-in for students to report bullying and other misconduct. 24/7 hotline to call in. Because it's a real problem. Because it's in our community. It's not just these children that have been taken from their parents because their parents aren't doing the kind of job or can't do the kind of job that needs to be done. November 4, 2017, Fox 54 reports 30 parents take kids out of Grissom due to fights. As many as 5 fights breaking out during the lunch period. And what kids were doing in this time frame that the administrators were complaining about, it became a social media thing. We have a fight and we'll post it on TikTok or whatever they use and get a bunch of likes with this crazy school fight that we're showing. That's happening in the public school system. I've been sort of watching out for this stuff since this whole issue came. Because it did cross my mind, you know, I know you guys don't want to hold us up to a different standard or treat these children different than other children with similar problems. I know you don't want to. And I started thinking about that and watching in the news what was happening. I told you about the Carver County event, the arrest just in February. This one's close to home to me. Challenger School, elementary school. My daughter taught there 3 years. Second grader brings a gun to school in their backpack. This was reported, this was in January or February. Let me get the date. I didn't write it on my notes. February 6, 2025. Reported by WAFF. They're here. Second grader has a pistol in their backpack. It goes off. In the public school, elementary school. You know what else my daughter told me? The police were called to that school all the time. All the time. Just like their calls up here several times every few months. We'll go over that in more detail. They were called because kids would leave the campus. And the rule was teachers can't go chasing kids around town if they leave the campus. Police were frequently called. And I don't know about your elementary school. I saw that it was a stellar elementary school, from what I read. Like my hometown school, Muscle Shoals, great school system. So you may not have some of those problems that are in other places in Madison County, but it exists. One of the exhibits I'm going to leave with you guys to read is from the CDC. It's data and statistics on children's mental health. 1 in 7 children aged 3 to 17 has a current diagnosed mental or behavioral health condition. 1 in 7, that's 3 to 17. It's actually higher when you look at 12 to 17. Our youngest child is 10. I think our oldest is 18. But it's actually higher when you get up to the teenage years, as you would sort of expect. Among U.S. adolescents aged 12 to 17 in 2021 and 2022, 21% reported symptoms of anxiety in the past 2 weeks. 17% reported symptoms of depression in the past 2 weeks. 40% reported persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness in the last year. 20% reported seriously considering attempting suicide in the past year. That's of the general population of our children 12 to 17. 16% reported making a suicide plan in the past year. 9% reported attempting suicide in the past year. No, the kids at Pathway are not the only kids in this community that have thoughts of suicide, that have severe depression, that have anxiety disorders. Kids all around us have those problems. They're not more dangerous because the state of Alabama is protecting them from their home lives by having them in the care of Pathway. So what's the reason to put Pathway out of business? The children are children, just like children in the general population. Yes, every single child we have has got some trauma in their life that's affecting them. No question about that. And that's not true of every single kid in the public school. But it's true of a lot of the kids in the public school. They're getting help by professionals. A lot of the kids, this same article will tell you that a huge percentage of children who have these problems aren't getting any help whatsoever. Every child at Pathway is seeing a professional who's trying to make a difference. And sometimes is making a difference. It's not a 100% process. I won't be disingenuous with you. But everyone's trying to make a difference. I know there's been an issue with police calls. One of the things I've communicated to council is if you guys feel that it's an inordinate, unfair financial burden about the number of calls that have to be made, and want to have some reasonable stipend of expense that we reimburse the city, Pathway's fine with that. We're not trying to mooch off the good citizens of Owens Cross Roads. Not in the least. We're totally fine with that. We offer that and are willing to do it. But let's talk about police calls. We started taking kids in June of 2024. Before the September 2nd incident, Chief Dobson was kind enough with council's request to give us the calls that were made. Calls may be the wrong word, but when we have incident reports completed and accident reports completed, he was kind enough to pull those for us. 5 before the September 2nd incident. 3 fights, assaults, similar to what is happening in the public schools here. 1 harassment, and 1 healthcare call because of a child feeling suicidal or voicing that they feel suicidal. After September 2nd, so that was in 2.5 months, 5 calls. After September 2nd, total in the 6 months since, a total of 4 calls. Only part of that time, Dr. Fegan was in charge. She's making a difference in her interaction with these children. We had, on September 9th, before she became involved, an assault call. On October 21, and I'm not sure whether she started or not, she probably had just about started, we had a call from Hemsey for a police presence when one of the employees had been injured, like the teacher was injured at Huntsville High School. November 13th, 2024, there was a call regarding a child who may have attempted suicide, made from Huntsville Urgent Care when the staff had taken the child into the urgent care facility. And then on January 4th, 2025, we had 3 runaways who got off campus. Basically, I've gone and looked at it. there's a wooden fence that's tall, and on the side of it, near the trees, which probably because of the trees blocking the sunlight, this stayed wetter and it rotted quicker. And they kicked it in, kicked the nails out, and got out with quickly found and quickly made safe. But you know what? That's not any more dangerous to this community than some kids from the high school walking down the street. The danger is for those kids who run away in that context, if they get taken up by somebody who wants to take advantage of them. Now, let's compare that with, because we want to hold Pathway to a fair standard. So let's compare that with the predecessor, sequel. One of the articles that I'll leave with you guys is August 18th, 2019 article about, I think it was quite a few, I can't remember the exact number, quite a few children had left the premises when sequel operated. And Chief Dobson was quoted as saying there was 5 to 10 escapes in the previous 12 months and 6 to 10 assaults. So Pathway is certainly doing a better job than was done at that time. When Pathway came here, so let me say this, because there's been some misinformation put out about, well, it's the same people, we're just changing names. That ain't true. The ownership of Pathway has been doing this kind of work for 40 years. If you want to have witnesses, you'll hear a witness who's been working with Pathway for 20 years. It's not true that it's the same old retread with names changed. Pathway is an entity. If you want to call DHR, call DHR. Ask them about Pathway's performance for these children. Pathway is a separate entity that has a stellar reputation, unlike maybe some of the predecessors, and is doing good work, according to the DHR. And there's a need. DHR put out a request for proposal. Some of you folks work in government-related businesses. That's because there was a need. They needed the facility in North Alabama. It's not a retread of the previous companies. It is doing a good job. It has less police calls than the predecessors. That has dramatically ramped down since Dr. Fegan came on board. Since we took, we didn't just have a major problem and say, okay, we're just going to let it ride. We changed management, and it's made a difference. You know, I mentioned that the Alabama Sheriff Youth Ranches in Carver County, it's called, if you want to Google it, it's called Fame Girls Ranch. I'll leave you an article about it, where they actually interviewed my mother. But my wife was the director of that for 12 years, and we had a basic level care, which means the children don't have as much help, don't need as much help. And the thing that strikes me is what I want you to know, so you'll be fair to Pathway, because I know that's what you want to do, is let's don't hold them to some unrealistic standard. This is hard work. We're associated with, we have 24 board members, 8 of them are sheriffs, men that know what they're doing in these types of things. And yet, in our care with basic level children, we have runaways. We have fights. We have to call Littleville. We were driving around Littleville. Our farm is right outside of Littleville. It's Owens Cross Roads in northwest Alabama. I mean, it's a similar size. The town hall is similar. We have to call the Littleville police for help. They're happy to come. And that's what I'd love to see happen here. If I could convey to you what happens for us. When we have problems, we get help from the police. No questions. When we need funds to give these children, because what we want to do is give the children everything they would have if they were our own children. So we've had the president of a local bank donate cars to the children for them to learn to drive. We've got retired school teachers that come and tutor our kids. And it's a great opportunity for service for Owens Cross Roads. You know, if you can't do all that, these kids need Christmas. Take up a fund for Christmas for the kids. It's a great opportunity for service for you. Thomas Sowell said these rights make society better. Well, it can make Owens Cross Roads better if you'll embrace and help this organization and this group serve these kids and improve their lives. What these kids need more than anything is solid adults and affirmation and consistency. And that's what Pathway is trying to give them. And if the license is pulled, that's what they will lose, because they'll be shuffled around again to another place. And they'll have to get acclimated again to a whole new group of kids, a whole new group of administrators, a whole new group of teachers, and it'll set them back. That's the downside of taking this adverse action. One of the things that I've alluded to this, I wouldn't be a lawyer if I didn't repeat myself, so I'm wrapping up. But one of the things that we've talked about with counsel is due process. And I know you guys have publications that you have access to about according due process. And one of the things that I sort of wrote a legal memo that analyzed from my perspective what the legal obligations are in this context before you shut a company out of business. And I was citing decisions by the Alabama Supreme Court, and your attorneys, I'm sure, may agree in some respects with my analysis, and they may disagree in some respects. But the thumbnail sketch of it is that if you're going to regulate somebody, and given the fact that we want to be as free as we can in this country, the government needs to use the least restrictive means to achieve the goal that they're trying to achieve. So if something short of putting us out of business will work to solve the problem, then that's what you ought to do. Now, I will say, frankly, that given the society as a whole we're dealing with, I'm not sure there's a particular problem. But if you're worried about kids leaving the campus, if you're worried about expense, accept our offer to reimburse the expense. If you're worried about kids leaving campus, accept our offer to spend $50,000 erecting additional fencing, which to minimize that. And I'd be happy to walk the grounds. Richard White, before I got here, what I wanted to, because I have a cow farm, so I know about fences a little bit. We walked the property, and he showed me where the fencing would go. And you know what? I don't want to leave here with you guys thinking, I said, oh, if you put this fence up, no kid will ever leave campus. No, we take kids on field trips. If we're taking them on a field trip, one of them may take off, run across the field, and outrun us. You know, I mean, it can happen. So you know, they go to church. If the behavior is right, they want to be exposed out in the community. So it's not 100%, but I think it shows a lot of good faith about what our intentions are, that we're willing to commit to spend $50,000. I've given the bid from a Huntsville contractor that we'd likely use, that we're willing to commit to do that to give more peace of mind to the council and to the citizens here that you know, this runaway instance that occurred in early January will at least be minimized going forward in the future. And I you know, nothing's 100%, so I'm not gonna say 100%, but it's pretty substantial fencing, and it looks like it would be done in a way that would be a significant improvement in terms of security from the current circumstances. The other thing I want to say in closing, and I meant to say this earlier and I rambled around when I was talking about placements, that we can't reject placements just willy-nilly. We've got some discretion, like 5 or 10% of the time, but generally we have to accept the placement. But what we can do is if Dr. Fegan and the staff see a child that is a risk of physically harming themselves or someone else, we can refer them out and do that immediately. And I've had discussions with Dr. Fegan about that, and we have more experienced staff than we had 6 months ago, and we're not equipped to handle children that are at risk of hurting themselves or somebody else. This is a moderate level facility, so we're not at risk. We're not equipped to deal with that problem. So she refers any child out that she senses or that they believe have some propensity to harm themselves or someone else. And I totally forgot one important point that brought it to my mind. At one time, we had an intensive care facility. So you have basic, you have foster homes, like you could have foster children in your home. You have a basic level care, which is similar to foster care, which is what we have at our ranch. Then you have moderate care with children that in the DHR has these ratings, they have these criteria they go by. And then you have moderate care children, then you have intensive, children that need intensive care. And when we first started, we had intensive care. We have dropped that contract. We don't have children there any longer that need intensive care. And so that is another item, I think that's a check in terms of the council's peace of mind. So we've got Dr. Fegan, aggressively referring out any child that she senses has physical, a risk of physical harm. We have dropped intensive care. We're willing to erect the fencing. The staff is more experienced at de-escalating and at determining children that may need more therapy than we can give, more care than we need. All those things are pluses that I hope will let you, at the end of the day, decide, look, let's issue this business license and let's rally around and help this organization, help these kids that the state of Alabama says need and deserve our help. Y'all been very kind to be this attentive, and I'm sorry for rambling on a bit too much. Thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor, Council, our suggestion would be there's several, I guess, what you would mark as exhibits and introduce. Our suggestion would be just to allow Attorney Hall to let Ms. Hastings have those, and that way you guys can carefully consider what he's offering in addition to the transcript. If Mayor and the Council, if that, everybody's
acceptable.
So we just
Sure,
what you have
I
marked,
think that'll save everybody time too, yeah, and let them study them better.
we certainly appreciate Attorney Hall coming over. What we would suggest is at this point, this sort of bifurcated element of the hearing has concluded. We would remind members of the public that if they wish to be heard, they can appear at a council session and make a request for public comments. So is there anything else needed, Mr. Mayor, Council?
No, sir.
We certainly appreciate it.
Thank you. I do.
I forgot mine.
I took you.
I wrote it down. If there is anybody here, just a member of the public that would like to talk, I'd be happy to meet you in Hollow.
Yeah.